The billionaire CEO brought his fiancée to meet his family on Christmas, but his ex came with triplets and stole the night. Dominic, Eleanor's voice cut through the stunned silence of the drawing room. How wonderful that you've finally arrived. You remember Alessandra, of course. And these? Her hand gestured to the three identical little boys with unmistakable copper curls. Are your sons? Theo, Alexander, and James. They're 3.5 now. The crystal champagne flute slipped from Dominic's fingers, shattering on the marble floor as his face drained of color. What? Beside him, his fiancée Vivian froze, her emerald silk dress suddenly feeling like a costume in someone else's play. I tried to tell you, Alessandra said softly, her eyes reflecting years of unspoken pain. But you blocked my number, changed your email. Your lawyers made it clear any communication should go through them. They never told me, Dominic whispered, staring at the three little boys who were perfect miniature versions of himself. They never told me I was a father. Have you ever had a moment when your entire life changed in the space of a single breath? When everything you thought you knew about your past, present, and future was suddenly rewritten before your eyes? I'm Mr. Harrison, and today's story will take you inside a Christmas dinner that shattered one relationship, rekindled another, and forced a powerful man to confront the consequences of his choices. If you've ever wondered what happens when carefully constructed lives collide with hidden truths, you won't want to miss what happens next. Hi, my beautiful sisters. This story is for every woman who's ever felt like a supporting character in someone else's narrative. For those who've stood in rooms where they didn't quite belong, wondering if they should fight for their place or find the courage to write their own story instead. Remember that sometimes walking away isn't failure. It's the first step toward the life you truly deserve. Your worth isn't determined by how well you fit into someone else's world, but by how bravely you create your own. The snow fell in perfect, cinematic flakes outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Westbrook family estate. Inside, Dominic Westbrook adjusted his cufflinks for the third time, a rare tell of nervousness from a man whose confidence had graced the covers of business magazines worldwide. They're going to love you, he assured Vivian, his voice low and certain as they stood in the grand foyer. Just be yourself. Vivian Laurent smoothed the silk of her emerald dress, nodding slightly though her eyes betrayed her doubt. At 32, she had conquered the art world as a gallery owner and curator. Yet tonight she felt like an imposter in this world of old money and older expectations. Your mother has already rescheduled our introduction twice, she reminded him gently. And your sister's Instagram post about tonight was hardly subtle. Looking forward to meeting brother's latest acquisition. Not exactly a warm welcome. Dominic's jaw tightened momentarily before his practiced smile returned. Camille thinks she's funny, and mother is traditional. Christmas dinner is her domain. She just needed time to prepare properly. What he didn't say was that no woman had been invited to a Westbrook family Christmas since Alessandra. For years had passed since that relationship imploded spectacularly, yet her absence still echoed through these halls like a ghost that refused to fade. Mr. Dominic, the family's long-serving butler, appeared with impeccable timing. Your mother requests your presence in the main drawing room. The other guests have arrived. Other guests? Dominic's brow furrowed. There shouldn't be anyone else. Just family tonight. The butler's expression remained professionally neutral. Mrs. Westbrook felt a larger gathering would be more festive. As they followed the butler through the mansion's east wing, Vivian absorbed the details that wealth had assembled, the original Monet landscapes she would have recognized blindfolded, the subtle scent of beeswax and history, the weight of generations watching from gilt-framed portraits. Dominic had been born to this legacy. She was merely visiting. If you're finding this story of unexpected family revelations compelling, take a moment to hit that like button. Your engagement helps stories like these reach others who might need to hear them too. The drawing room doors opened to reveal a tableau that belonged in a society photographer's portfolio. Eleanor Westbrook, still regal at 68, held court near the fireplace. Dominic's sister Camille lounged elegantly on a chaise, her husband Theodore standing dutifully nearby. Various Westbrook cousins and their spouses clustered in practiced formations, champagne flutes glinting in the firelight. And then, like a disruption in the carefully composed scene, stood Alessandra Reyes. Vivian felt Dominic freeze beside her, his intake of breath sharp enough to cut. Alessandra looked different from the photos Vivian had secretly studied, softer somehow, her famous cheekbones less severe, her dark hair falling in natural waves rather than the sleek corporate style she'd worn as Dominic's general counsel and fiancée. But it wasn't Alessandra alone that had rendered the room silent. It was the three identical little boys clustered around her, their copper curls and amber eyes unmistakable echoes of the man standing beside Vivian. One of the boys tugged at Alessandra's hand. "Mama, is that him? The man from your pictures?" The room collectively held its breath. Vivian felt herself becoming invisible, fading into the background of a story that had begun long before her arrival. She watched as Dominic slowly knelt to the children's level, his expression transforming into something she had never witnessed before, vulnerability stripped of all pretense. "Hello," he said simply. "My name is Dominic." The boldest of the three stepped forward, studying Dominic's face with solemn intensity. "I'm Theo. I'm the oldest by 7 minutes." He pointed to his brothers. "That's Alex and that's Jamie. We're triplets. That means we grew in Mama's tummy at the same time." "I know what triplets means," Dominic replied, his voice gentle in a way Vivian had never heard. "It's very nice to meet you, Theo." Eleanor moved forward, her satisfaction poorly disguised as she placed a hand on Theo's shoulder. "I reached out to Alessandra myself when I learned about the boys. Family should be together at Christmas. Don't you agree? And the children deserved to meet their father." The calculated precision of the ambush was breathtaking. Vivian recognized it for what it was. Eleanor Westbrook had orchestrated this entire scenario, using innocent children as pawns in whatever game she was playing with her son. "Perhaps," Camille suggested with false brightness, "we should move to the dining room? The children must be hungry after their journey." As the group began to shift, Vivian found herself beside Alessandra in the momentary shuffle. Up close, she could see the exhaustion beneath the other woman's composure, the slight tremble in her hands as she guided her sons forward. "I didn't know about this setup," Alessandra said quietly, her eyes meeting Vivian's directly. "Eleanor called last week, said Dominic wanted to meet the boys. I should have known better, but..." She glanced at the children, now being fawned over by various Westbrook relatives. "They've been asking about their father. I thought it was time." Before Vivian could respond, Eleanor appeared between them, her smile sharp as cut crystal. "Vivian dear, I've seated you beside Theodore. He's in the art world as well, museum acquisitions. You'll have so much to discuss." The message couldn't have been clearer. Vivian had been relegated to the periphery. Tonight belonged to the narrative Eleanor was crafting, the return of Alessandra and the revelation of Westbrook heirs. The dining room gleamed with holiday splendor, the table set with heirloom silver and baccarat crystal, centerpieces of white roses and holly arranged with military precision. Vivian found herself seated far from Dominic, who had been placed at the head of the table with Alessandra to his right and Theo in a booster seat to his left. The other boys were distributed among doting relatives, creating a tableau of family connection that excluded her entirely. As the first course was served, Vivian observed the dynamics unfolding around her. Dominic appeared shell-shocked, answering questions mechanically while stealing glances at the boys. Alessandra maintained a dignified reserve, helping the children with their food and fielding the family's inquiries with practiced grace. Eleanor presided over it all like a chess master, each move calculated for maximum effect. "It must be difficult," Theodore murmured beside her. "Walking into this particular drama." Vivian sipped her wine, buying time. "I wasn't aware I'd be attending a theatrical production tonight." Theodore's laugh was genuine, if quiet. "The Westbrooks have always excelled at drama. Eleanor most of all." He glanced toward his mother-in-law. She never approved of Dominic and Alessandra's breakup. Thought he was a fool to let her go. "And what do you think?" Vivian found herself asking. Theodore considered this, his expression thoughtful. "I think Dominic and Alessandra were both too stubborn to compromise. Their careers pulled them in different directions. Neither would bend." He studied Vivian with newfound interest. "The question is, where do you fit in this revised narrative? It was a fair question, one Vivian had been asking herself since the moment they'd entered the drawing room. 6 months into her relationship with Dominic, she had believed they were building something meaningful. Now, watching him across the table as he tentatively answered his son's questions about his favorite dinosaurs, she wondered if she had merely been occupying space in a story that had never truly ended. "Did you know about them?" Vivian asked Theodore quietly, nodding toward the children. "No one did," he replied. "Not even Camille. And she knows everything about everyone." He leaned closer. "Though I suspect Eleanor might have discovered the truth recently. She's been unusually interested in Alessandra's whereabouts these past few months." Across the table, little Jamie was struggling with his fork, his small hands unable to manage the oversized silverware. Without hesitation, Dominic reached over, gently guiding the boy's fingers into a proper grip. "Like this," he said softly. "My father taught me the same way when I was your age." The simple gesture, so natural, so paternal, struck Vivian like a physical blow. In 6 months together, she had never seen this side of Dominic, this gentle patience. It was as though a different man had emerged from beneath the polished exterior she had come to know. "Thank you," Alessandra said, her eyes meeting Dominic's briefly before returning to her plate. "They've been excited about Christmas dinner. I'm afraid their table manners aren't quite up to Westbrook standards yet." "They're perfect," Eleanor interjected, beaming at her newly discovered grandsons. "Absolutely perfect. Don't you think so, Dominic?" All eyes turned to Dominic, who seemed caught between worlds, the life he had planned with Vivian, and this new reality thrust upon him without warning. "They're remarkable," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't quite name. "I just wish I had known sooner." The unspoken accusation hung in the air. Alessandra's shoulders stiffened slightly, but her expression remained composed. "Perhaps this isn't the appropriate time for such discussions," she suggested quietly. "The boys are listening." Indeed, all 3 children had paused in their eating, sensing the tension between the adults. Alex, the middle triplet who had remained quiet until now, looked up at Dominic with curious eyes. "Mama says you build big buildings," he said suddenly. "Taller than the clouds." Dominic's expression softened immediately. "That's right. My company designs skyscrapers all over the world." "Can we see one?" Alex asked, his small face alight with wonder. "Of course," Dominic replied without hesitation. "I'd love to show you." Vivian watched this exchange with a growing sense of unreality. The evening was unfolding like a play in which she had no lines, no role, no purpose. The engagement ring on her finger, a 5-carat diamond that had made headlines in the society pages, suddenly felt like a prop from a different production entirely. If you're finding yourself drawn into this unexpected family drama, hit that like button and subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. Your support helps me continue bringing these powerful stories of love, loss, and redemption to life. The dinner progressed through its carefully choreographed courses. By dessert, the youngest triplet, Jamie, had grown overtired and crawled into Alessandra's lap, his small head nestled against her shoulder as she continued her conversation with Dominic's uncle. The intimacy of the gesture, the practiced ease with which she balanced motherhood and social obligation, highlighted everything Vivian was not in this equation. When Eleanor rose to suggest the ladies retire to the drawing room while the men enjoyed brandy, Vivian excused herself instead, claiming a need for fresh air. No one protested her departure. The terrace was bitterly cold, but the shock of winter air cleared her head. From here, she could see through the windows into the warm glow of the house. The perfect family Christmas she had hoped to join now playing out without her. "You'll freeze out here." She turned to find Alessandra in the doorway, holding out a cashmere wrap. "I needed a moment," Vivian admitted, accepting the offering with reluctant gratitude. Alessandra nodded, stepping onto the terrace and closing the door behind her. "I owe you an apology. I had no idea Eleanor was using this as some sort of reconciliation scheme. I genuinely thought Dominic knew we were coming. Would you have come if you'd known the truth?" "For the boys, yes." Alessandra's gaze was direct, unflinching. "They deserve to know their father, regardless of the complications between us adults." The honesty was disarming. Vivian had constructed an image of Alessandra as the villain in Dominic's past, the career-obsessed ex who had chosen advancement over love. Standing here now, she seemed instead like a woman who had made difficult choices and lived with their consequences. "He never told me about the possibility of children," Vivian said finally, "because he didn't know." Alessandra's response was immediate, defensive of Dominic despite everything. "I made the decision to keep the pregnancy private after my attempts to reach him failed. Perhaps that was wrong, but at the time," she trailed off, looking out at the snow-covered gardens. "At the time, I was hurt and proud and terrified of raising 3 children alone while fighting to make partner at my firm. By the time I was ready to try again, he was with someone new. Then another someone. Then you." The implication hung between them. Dominic had moved on repeatedly, while Alessandra had been raising their children. "How did you manage?" Vivian found herself asking, genuinely curious. 3 babies and a law career? Alessandra's laugh held no humor. "Not gracefully, I assure you. My mother moved in for the first year. I took a 6-month leave, then worked reduced hours. Made partner a year later than planned." She shrugged slightly. "You adapt. You find strength you didn't know you had. And now? Why come back into his life after all this time?" Alessandra turned to face her fully. "Now I have 3 little boys who deserve to know both their parents. I have a career I've built while being a single mother. I have a life that doesn't revolve around Dominic Westbrook, despite what his mother might wish." Her expression softened slightly. "What happens next isn't up to me or to Eleanor or even to you. It's up to Dominic to decide what kind of man he wants to be." Before Vivian could respond, the terrace door opened again. Dominic stood framed in the light, his expression unreadable as he took in the 2 women. "The boys are asking for their mother," he said to Alessandra. "They're getting tired." Alessandra nodded, casting one last glance at Vivian before moving past Dominic into the warmth of the house. He remained in the doorway, watching Vivian with eyes that seemed to be seeing her clearly for the first time. "I didn't know," he said simply, "about the boys. I swear to you. I believe you." And she did, surprisingly. The shock in his face had been too genuine, too raw to be fabricated. "Everything's changed tonight," he continued, stepping onto the terrace and letting the door close behind him. "I have children. 3 children I never knew existed. I've missed 3 years of their lives already." "What are you saying, Dominic?" He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture uncharacteristically vulnerable for a man who prided himself on control. "I'm saying I don't know what happens next, but I know I can't miss another day with them. I need to be their father." The unspoken implication hung in the frigid air between them. Whatever future they had been building together had just been fundamentally altered. The engagement ring on Vivian's finger suddenly felt heavy, burdensome. "Your mother orchestrated this entire evening," Vivian said quietly. "She deliberately blindsided both of us. Used those children as pawns in whatever game she's playing." "That doesn't change the reality," Dominic replied. "They exist. They're my sons. And Alessandra? What is she in this new reality?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "She's their mother. Is that all?" Dominic's silence was answer enough. In the space of a single evening, the certainties of their relationship had dissolved, replaced by questions neither of them had been prepared to face. Inside the house, through the window, Vivian could see Alessandra gathering her sleepy children, Eleanor hovering nearby with undisguised satisfaction. The scene was picture-perfect. The prodigal family returned, Christmas restored to its proper order. "I should go back inside," Dominic said finally. "The boys, they're saying good night." "Of course," Vivian replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging within. "They need their father." As Dominic turned to leave, Vivian caught his arm. "Dominic, wait. I need to know. If you had known about the pregnancy, would you have stayed with her?" His hesitation told her everything. "I'd like to think I would have done the right thing." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." He gently removed her hand from his arm. "I need to say goodnight to my sons." Alone on the terrace, Vivian watched through the window as Dominic knelt before his sons. Even from a distance, She could see the transformation in his face, the wonder, the instant connection, the unmistakable recognition of himself in their features. Theo, the oldest, was already mimicking Dominic's mannerisms, standing with the same slight tilt of the head. Alex was showing him something on a small electronic device, his expression serious and focused. And little Jamie, fighting sleep, reached up with complete trust to touch Dominic's face. It was a tableau of family connection that needed no explanation, no justification. Blood recognizing blood, legacy made flesh. And in that moment, watching from the outside, Vivian knew with absolute clarity that her place in this story had fundamentally changed. The future she had imagined with Dominic, the society wedding already half planned, the penthouse they'd been renovating together, the carefully timed children they'd discussed having someday. All of it had been rendered obsolete in the space of a single evening. She slipped the engagement ring from her finger and held it in her palm, the diamond catching the light from the house. 5 carats of promise, now transformed into a weight she could no longer bear. When Dominic returned to the terrace 10 minutes later, his face was flushed with emotion. "They're extraordinary," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Theo already knows all the planets and their moons. Alex has been designing buildings with his blocks since he was 2. And Jamie," he paused, overwhelmed. "Jamie hugged me goodnight as though he's known me his whole life." "They're your sons," Vivian said softly. "Of course they're extraordinary." Dominic nodded, still processing this new reality. "Alessandra's taking them up to the guest rooms. They're staying the night. I thought perhaps we could all have breakfast together tomorrow. Start figuring out how this works going forward." "We?" Vivian asked, holding out the ring in her open palm. "I think we both know this isn't my story anymore." He didn't take the ring immediately, his expression conflicted. "Vivian, I never intended." "I know," she interrupted gently. "But intentions don't change what is. Those boys need their father. And you need time to figure out what that means." She placed the ring in his palm, closing his fingers around it. "Without an audience." As she stepped past him toward the door, Dominic caught her arm. "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate but sincere. "Don't be," Vivian replied, surprising herself with the truth in her response. "Some stories are written long before we enter them. This one belongs to your family, past, present, and future. If this story of unexpected revelations and difficult choices resonates with you, please take a moment to subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. Your support allows me to continue sharing these powerful stories of love, loss, and redemption." She moved through the house quietly, gathering her coat and bag without returning to the drawing room. As she waited for the car Dominic's assistant had summoned, Vivian caught a final glimpse through the doorway. Dominic kneeling before his sons, Alessandra watching with guarded hope, Eleanor presiding over the scene with triumphant satisfaction. The night had indeed been stolen, but perhaps it had always belonged to this moment, this revelation, this family being forged in the crucible of truth finally spoken. Vivian's part in the story had been brief, a detour rather than a destination. As the car pulled away from the Westbrook estate, snow falling thick and silent around her, Vivian felt an unexpected lightness. She had lost something tonight, but perhaps she had also been freed from a narrative that was never truly hers to claim. Behind her, framed in the glow of Christmas lights and generations of wealth, the Westbrook family portrait was being redrawn, complicated, messy, and undeniably real. 1 year later, Vivian stood in her gallery, surveying the final arrangements for her most ambitious exhibition yet. Revelations, moments of truth, had already generated significant buzz in the art world, her curation of works exploring pivotal moments of human recognition and transformation. The centerpiece, a triptych of paintings she had commissioned specifically for the show, depicted 3 perspectives of the same moment. A man discovering his children, a woman recognizing it was time to leave, and 3 small boys meeting their father for the first time. The artist had captured the raw emotion of that Christmas night with uncanny precision, though Vivian had shared only the barest outline of the story that had inspired it. "It's extraordinary," a familiar voice said behind her. "Though perhaps a bit too personal for public consumption?" Vivian turned to find Alessandra standing there, more relaxed than she had appeared that night a year ago, her professional attire softened by a colorful scarf that looked suspiciously like a child's art project. Alessandra. Vivian greeted her with genuine warmth. I didn't expect to see you here. Dominic mentioned your opening was tonight. I was in the city for a case and thought I'd stop by. She gestured toward the triptych. Though I didn't realize I'd be part of the exhibition. Is it too much? Vivian asked, suddenly concerned. I can have it removed before the opening. Alessandra studied the paintings thoughtfully. No, it's truthful and beautifully rendered. She turned to Vivian with a small smile. Besides, the story had a happy ending. Didn't it? Did it? Vivian asked, genuinely curious. I've deliberately avoided the society pages this past year. Wise choice, Alessandra laughed. They've been particularly creative with their speculation. She paused, considering her words carefully. The reality is less sensational. Dominic moved to a house near mine in Connecticut. He sees the boys almost daily. We're co-parenting effectively. Just co-parenting? Vivian couldn't help asking. Alessandra's expression softened. For now, we're taking things slowly, focusing on the children first. Learning how to be partners in that before considering anything else. She studied Vivian with genuine concern. And you? Are you well? I am, Vivian replied, surprised by how true it was. That night was painful but necessary. It forced me to recognize I was trying to fit myself into someone else's world rather than creating my own. She gestured to the gallery around them. This is my world, my vision, my creation. It's magnificent, Alessandra said sincerely. You should be proud. As they stood together before the triptych, an unlikely friendship forming in the space where rivalry might have flourished, Vivian reflected on the strange paths life sometimes took. How a night that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning for all of them. The boys ask about you sometimes, Alessandra said suddenly. They remember the pretty lady in the green dress from that Christmas. Theo especially. He has a remarkable memory. They're well, Vivian asked. Thriving, growing too fast, challenging their father at every turn. Alessandra's smile was full of maternal pride. They'd love to see you sometime, if that wouldn't be too strange. I'd like that, Vivian replied, surprised to find she meant it. As Alessandra prepared to leave, she paused at the gallery entrance. You know, Eleanor still hasn't forgiven you for returning the ring. She had the Christmas wedding all planned in her head. Vivian laughed. I'm sure she did. Give her my regards. Actually, you can tell her yourself. She's hosting a charity gala next month for children's education. Dominic mentioned you were on the invitation list. I received it, Vivian acknowledged. I wasn't sure if I should attend. You should, Alessandra said firmly. Your absence would only fuel more gossip. Besides, she added with a wry smile, I could use an ally. The Westbrook family gatherings are still intense. After Alessandra left, Vivian returned to the triptych, studying the central panel, the moment of recognition captured in Dominic's face as he knelt before his sons for the first time. The artist had perfectly rendered that mixture of shock, wonder, and instant connection. What the painting couldn't show was what had happened next, how that moment had rippled outward, changing not just Dominic's life but everyone connected to him. How truth, once spoken, could never be unheard. How sometimes the most painful revelations led to the most necessary transformations. My friends, life rarely unfolds according to our carefully laid plans. Sometimes the most profound growth comes from moments that initially feel like devastating losses. Vivian could have clung to her relationship with Dominic, fighting for her place in a story that was no longer hers. Instead, she found the courage to recognize when it was time to write her own narrative. And that, perhaps, is the most valuable lesson from this Christmas night that changed 3 families forever. Knowing when to hold on, when to let go, and having the wisdom to recognize the difference. The gallery opening proved to be a turning point for Vivian in more ways than one. As guests filtered through the exhibition, praising her curatorial vision, she found herself repeatedly drawn back to the triptych that told her own story. Critics called it the emotional center of the show, unaware of how literally true that assessment was. "You've outdone yourself," Marcus Holloway, her most significant investor, said as he joined her by the paintings. "There's something different about your work this year. More authentic." Vivian smiled, swirling the champagne in her glass. "I suppose I've learned something about authenticity recently." "Well, whatever inspired this collection, hold on to it. We've already sold 4 pieces, and the night's barely begun." He nodded toward a tall figure entering the gallery. "Including one to your ex-fiancée, apparently." Vivian turned to see Dominic making his way through the crowd, commanding attention without effort as he always had. Unlike the last time she'd seen him, he looked different somehow, more grounded, less polished. The perfectly tailored suit remained, but his hair was slightly longer, his expression more open. "I didn't know he was coming," she said quietly. "Should I run interference?" Marcus offered, protective as always. "No need. That chapter's closed for both of us." As Dominic approached, Vivian was surprised by the absence of pain. The sight of him no longer carried the sharp sting of rejection or loss, just a gentle acknowledgement of what had been and what could not be. "Congratulations," he said, gesturing to the crowded gallery. "The show is remarkable." "Thank you," she replied simply. "I'm surprised to see you here. Alessandra mentioned she'd stopped by." She was impressed. He glanced toward the triptych, his expression thoughtful. "As am I. You've captured something profound there." "Truth usually is," Vivian said, "even when it's uncomfortable." They stood in silence for a moment, the awkwardness of their last encounter giving way to something more measured, more mature. "I purchased the landscape series in the East Room," Dominic said finally. "The one with the path disappearing into fog, then emerging into light. It seemed appropriate." Vivian nodded, understanding the symbolism without needing elaboration. "It's one of my favorites as well." The artist spent 2 years working through grief after losing his wife. Those paintings chart his journey. "That explains their power." Dominic hesitated, then added, "The boys have been asking about you, especially after Alessandra's visit here. She mentioned that. I'd like to see them sometime. Perhaps at Eleanor's charity gala next month? They'll be there for the early portion before bedtime." The invitation surprised her. "You want me to attend? I think it would be good. For closure, if nothing else." He smiled slightly. "Besides, Eleanor's been insufferable about the guest list. Your RSVP would settle at least one of her many concerns." Vivian laughed despite herself. "Still trying to control every detail? Some things never change." His expression grew more serious. "Though some things do. I've been seeing a therapist this past year, trying to understand why I handled Alessandra's departure the way I did. Why I blocked her out so completely. And have you found answers?" "Some. Enough to recognize patterns I don't want to repeat." He glanced around the gallery, taking in her success with evident respect. "You seem to have found your own path forward." "I have," she agreed, "though it wasn't the one I expected to take." As their conversation concluded and Dominic moved on to view the rest of the exhibition, Vivian felt a sense of completion that had been missing. The jagged edges of their parting had smoothed, allowing both to move forward without the burden of unresolved pain. My friends, if you're finding value in this exploration of how relationships transform us, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. Your support allows me to continue sharing these stories of human connection and growth. The month between the gallery opening and Eleanor's charity gala passed quickly for Vivian. The success of her exhibition had brought new opportunities, offers to curate for major museums, invitations to international art fairs, even preliminary discussions about writing a book on emerging artists. She found herself too busy to dwell on the approaching Westbrook event until the evening itself arrived. Standing before her closet, Vivian deliberately bypassed the emerald silk she'd worn that fateful Christmas night. Instead, she chose a deep blue gown that reflected her current self, confident, independent, no longer seeking to fit into someone else's world. The Westbrook Foundation's annual charity gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, transformed for the evening into a winter wonderland of crystalline decorations and subtle lighting. As Vivian handed her wrap to an attendant, she steeled herself for the inevitable scrutiny. The society pages had speculated endlessly about her broken engagement, creating narratives far more dramatic than the truth. "Vivian Laurent," a familiar voice called. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." She turned to find Camille approaching, elegant as always in a crimson gown that complemented her dark hair. Dominic's sister had always been the most enigmatic of the Westbrooks, sharp-tongued but perceptive, judgmental yet surprisingly fair. "I nearly didn't," Vivian admitted, "but hiding seemed worse than facing whatever whispers might follow me tonight." "Brave," Camille nodded approvingly. "And wise. Nothing feeds gossip like absence." She linked her arm through Vivian's with unexpected warmth. "Come, let me reintroduce you to everyone as yourself, not as Dominic's fiancée. You've made quite a name in the art world this year." The gesture of solidarity surprised Vivian. "I thought you'd be firmly on Team Alessandra." Camille laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "Oh, I am. She's perfect for my brother, always was. But that doesn't mean I can't appreciate what you've accomplished, or recognize that you handled an impossible situation with remarkable grace." As Camille guided her through the crowd, Vivian was struck by how differently she experienced the Westbrook social circle now. Without the pressure of being the future Mrs. Dominic Westbrook, she could engage with these people as herself, an accomplished professional with her own identity and achievements. "There they are," Camille said, nodding toward a corner of the grand hall where Dominic stood with Alessandra and the boys. All three children dressed in miniature tuxedos that somehow managed to look both adorable and dignified. Theo spotted her first, his face lighting up with recognition. "It's the lady from Christmas," he announced loudly, causing several nearby conversations to pause. "The one in the painting." Vivian approached the family group with a genuine smile. "Hello, Theo. You have an excellent memory." "I remember everything," he declared proudly. "Daddy says it's both a gift and a terror." "That sounds accurate," Vivian laughed, glancing at Dominic, who shrugged with the resigned expression of a man who had learned his words would be repeated verbatim by his observant son. Alex studied her with serious eyes. "Are you still mad at Daddy?" The directness of the question created a moment of awkward silence. Alessandra began to intervene, but Vivian shook her head slightly. "No, Alex, I'm not mad at your father," she said honestly. "Sometimes grown-ups discover they're on different paths, and that's okay. Your dad needed to be with you and your brothers, and I needed to follow my own journey." The boy considered this thoughtfully. "Like when trains switch tracks?" "Exactly like that," Vivian agreed, impressed by his analogy. Little Jamie, still the quietest of the three, tugged at her dress. "Do you like dinosaurs?" he asked, his expression earnest. "I do," she replied solemnly. "Especially Triceratops." "Me too." His face lit up with delight. "Daddy, she likes Triceratops best too." The simple exchange broke the remaining tension. For the next 15 minutes, Vivian found herself drawn into the boys' world, their favorite dinosaurs, their new school, the treehouse Dominic was building in the Connecticut backyard. Watching them interact with both Dominic and Alessandra, she could see how the past year had forged them into a cohesive family unit, different from traditional models perhaps, but solid in its foundations. When the children's nanny arrived to take them home for bedtime, each boy insisted on hugging Vivian goodbye. As they departed, Theo turned back with a parting observation. "You're nicer than Daddy's other girlfriends. They don't really talk to us." As the children were led away by their nanny, Dominic's gaze followed them with unmistakable pride before returning to Alessandra. Something in the way he looked at her, a softness, a familiarity that went beyond co-parenting, caught Vivian's attention. "They're remarkable children," Vivian said sincerely. "You've both done an amazing job with them." "Alessandra deserves most of the credit," Dominic replied, his voice warm with admiration. "She raised them alone for 3 years while building her legal career. I'm still catching up." Alessandra shook her head, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "We're figuring it out together now. That's what matters." The way they stood together, not touching, yet somehow connected by an invisible current, told Vivian everything she needed to know. What had begun as pragmatic co-parenting had clearly evolved into something deeper over the past year. "I should circulate," Vivian said, recognizing her cue to exit. "There are several museum directors here I'd like to speak with." As she moved through the gala, occasionally glancing back at Dominic and Alessandra, Vivian noticed how they gravitated toward each other throughout the evening. Their body language spoke volumes, the way Dominic's hand would briefly touch the small of Alessandra's back as they navigated the crowd, how she would lean slightly toward him when they spoke, the private smiles they exchanged over shared observations. Later, as the orchestra began playing for dancing, Vivian found herself standing near Eleanor Westbrook, who was surveying the room with her usual regal assessment. "You've done well for yourself this year," Eleanor observed, nodding toward a group of influential art patrons who had been seeking Vivian's attention all evening. "I always said you had potential." "Thank you," Vivian replied, choosing to accept the backhanded compliment at face value. "Your charity gala is impressive. The Children's Education Initiative is important work." Eleanor's gaze drifted to where Dominic was leading Alessandra onto the dance floor. "Some things work out as they should, despite our best efforts to arrange them otherwise." The admission, as close to an apology as Eleanor Westbrook would ever come, surprised Vivian. "They seem happy. They always were, beneath the ambition and stubbornness." Eleanor sipped her champagne thoughtfully. "Sometimes people need to grow separately before they can truly grow together." On the dance floor, Dominic and Alessandra moved with the natural rhythm of two people who knew each other deeply. As the music played, they seemed to forget the crowded room, their conversation growing more intimate, their expressions more unguarded. "They never stopped loving each other, did they?" Vivian asked quietly. "No," Eleanor confirmed, though it took 3 little boys and a year of rediscovery for them to admit it. She turned to Vivian with unexpected kindness. "You deserved better than to be caught in their unfinished story. I hope you know that. My friends, if you believe in second chances and the power of love to find its way back, even after years apart, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. These stories of redemption and reconnection deserve to be shared." 6 months after the gala, Vivian received a handwritten invitation. The heavy cream cardstock bore the Westbrook family crest, but the handwriting was Alessandra's, distinctive and precise, just like the woman herself. "A small family ceremony," it read, "to celebrate what was lost and found again." The wedding was held in the gardens of the Connecticut home Dominic had purchased to be near his sons. Unlike the elaborate society event that would have marked his marriage to Vivian, this celebration was intimate and deeply personal. No more than 50 guests gathered on the summer afternoon, seated on simple white chairs arranged beneath flowering trees. The triplets, now 4 years old, served as ring bearers, their copper curls gleaming in the sunlight as they walked solemnly down the aisle ahead of their mother. Alessandra wore not white, but a pale blue gown that moved like water around her, her dark hair adorned with small white flowers that the boys had helped select. Dominic waited beneath an arch of roses, his expression one of complete certainty, a man who had found his way home after a long journey. When Alessandra reached him, he took her hands with reverence, as though accepting both a gift and a responsibility. 4 years ago, the officiant began. These two people parted ways, believing their paths led in different directions. Today, they stand before us having discovered that sometimes the longest route is the one that leads us back to where we truly belong. From her seat near the back, Vivian watched the ceremony with genuine happiness for them both. The past 18 months had transformed her own life in ways she could never have imagined that Christmas night. Her career had flourished, her sense of self strengthened. She had even begun a cautious relationship with an architect who appreciated her independence rather than seeing it as an obstacle to overcome. As Dominic and Alessandra exchanged vows, their words reflected not the idealistic promises of first love, but the hard-won wisdom of those who had lost each other and found their way back. "I choose you," Dominic said, his voice carrying clearly across the garden. "Not because I can't imagine my life without you, but because I've lived that life and found it incomplete. I choose our children, our family, our shared future with all its complications and compromises." Alessandra's response was equally moving. "I choose you," knowing exactly who you are, your strengths and your flaws. I choose to build something stronger than what we had before, something founded on truth and mutual respect. I choose us are not perfect, but perfectly right for each other. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the triplets erupted in cheers before Dominic had even kissed his bride. As the couple embraced, Theo tugged at his father's jacket. "Does this mean we all live in the same house now?" he asked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Yes, buddy," Dominic laughed, lifting his son into his arms while keeping his other hand firmly entwined with Alessandra's. "We're officially all one family now." "We always were," Alex corrected seriously. "Now everyone else knows it too." The wisdom from the mouth of a 4-year-old brought smiles and a few tears from the assembled guests. Jamie, not to be outdone by his brothers, wrapped his arms around both his parents' legs, creating a family tableau that captured the journey they had taken, from separation to reunion, from misunderstanding to profound connection. At the reception that followed, Vivian found herself seated with Camille and Theodore, watching as Dominic and Alessandra shared their first dance as husband and wife. "They look happy," Theodore observed. "Genuinely happy. Not Westbrook appropriate for public consumption happy." "They are," Camille confirmed, though it took them long enough to figure it out. She turned to Vivian with characteristic directness. "Are you really okay with all this? Being here today?" Vivian considered the question honestly. "I am. What Dominic and I had was real in its way, but it wasn't this." She gestured toward the couple, who were now laughing as their sons insisted on joining their dance. "They have a history, a family, a connection that runs deeper than anything he and I could have built." Later, as the celebration continued under twinkling lights strung through the trees, Alessandra sought Vivian out, her new wedding band catching the light as she approached. "Thank you for coming," she said sincerely. "It means a lot to us, to me, that you're here." "I wouldn't have missed it," Vivian replied. "Your vows were beautiful." Alessandra smiled, glancing toward where Dominic was attempting to teach the boys a simple dance step, all 4 of them laughing at his exaggerated movements. "We had to lose each other to understand what we really had," she said thoughtfully. "When I left 4 years ago, I was so focused on my career, on proving myself. Dominic was expanding the company globally. We both thought we could have it all without compromise. And now we understand that compromise isn't losing. It's choosing what matters most." She touched Vivian's arm gently. "I've never properly thanked you." "For what?" "For how gracefully you stepped aside that Christmas night. You could have fought, made things difficult. Instead, you recognized what the boys needed before Dominic did." Vivian shook her head. "I just acknowledged what was already true." As the evening progressed, Dominic approached Vivian during a quiet moment, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered one to her with a smile that held friendship without awkwardness. "To new beginnings," he proposed, raising his glass. "And to finding where we truly belong." "To family," Vivian countered, clinking her glass against his. "In all its many forms." They stood in comfortable silence, watching as Alessandra danced with each of her sons in turn, her face alight with joy. "You know," Dominic said finally, "that night, the Christmas when everything changed, I was devastated by what I'd lost with Alessandra, by the years I'd missed with my sons. But I was also devastated by hurting you." He met her eyes directly. "I want you to know I never intended to make you collateral damage in our unfinished story." "I know that now," Vivian assured him. "And in a strange way, I'm grateful. That night forced me to find my own path rather than adapting myself to yours." As the celebration continued around them, Vivian watched Dominic return to his new wife and their children. The 4 of them stood together under the summer stars, a family constellation that had found its proper alignment after years of separation. Later that night, after most guests had departed, Dominic and Alessandra stood on the terrace of their home, watching the last of the lights being taken down in the garden. "Mrs. Westbrook," Dominic said softly, drawing her into his arms. "After all this time, it still feels like a miracle that we found our way back to each other." "Mr. Westbrook," she replied, her eyes reflecting the same wonder. "Perhaps it was inevitable. Some connections can't be broken, only temporarily misplaced. As he leaned down to kiss her, their 3 sons appeared in the doorway in their pajamas, unwilling to miss any part of this momentous day. "Are you kissing again?" Theo asked with the exaggerated disgust of a 4-year-old. "Yes," Dominic replied unapologetically. "I plan to kiss your mother quite regularly for the rest of our lives." "That's acceptable," Alex decided after serious consideration. "Since you're married now." Jamie, always the most sentimental of the 3, simply smiled. "We're a real family now," he said with satisfaction. Alessandra knelt to